Hey there, I just thought I'd take a couple of minutes here of YouTube time and show you a sampling from my comic book collection. I actually started collecting comics back in '91, and believe it or not, my first comics weren't Star Wars comics, but I'll get to that in a moment. There are a lot of Star Wars comics out there. There's the Legacy series. So some of these have concluded, but these are a part of my collection. Star Wars Invasion. And these are all storylines that kind of surround the Star Wars movies. Sometimes some happen before, some happen after, some haven't happened during. It's just kind of the way that plays out. And a lot of these comic lines have like beginning storylines, and they do come to a definite ending. There are some comics in my collection that I collect just because, you know, they're interesting to me. Like, I'm sort of a big fan of the TV show 24, and then when they came out with comics, I snapped a couple of those up. And these are one-shot comics, meaning that this is the only one that they printed. It's not a continuing series. The Simpsons, actually, believe it or not, was my very first comic series that I started collecting when I lived up in Minnesota. I never got Simpsons comic number 1. I'm still looking for that one. I'll bet that one's going to cost me. There were a lot of offshoots of the Simpsons comic, like Radioactive Man, which was the fictional series that you always hear mentioned, you know, on the TV show about Radioactive Man comics, the Radioactive Man movie, and they came out with a lot of very creative Radioactive Men comics that kind of spanned through all the generations of comic book styles. A very good series. They came out with the Bartman miniseries there, with Bart as his alter ego there, and that is Bartman number 1 there. The Futurama comics came out, coinciding with the TV show, and they are continuing to be published as the Futurama series continues. This was kind of a bizarre series, the MTV Beavis and Butthead comic series that I just collected for the heck of it because I thought it was interesting. Spider-Girl, I was a big Spider-Man kid, so I thought, oh, I'll start collecting Spider-Girl, but that series continues. I think I stopped after like 13 issues, but it was fun. It was fun to read. I was a big video game guy, and then when they came out with Dragon's Lair, which was a huge video game when I'm a kid, not too long ago, a couple of years ago, they came out with the Dragon's Lair comic, but the comic book publisher, I guess, didn't do all that well, so this stopped after about 2 or 3 issues, but I liked the art because it was very close to the video game. They came up with a comic book for the other video game that Don Bluth did, not only Dragon's Lair, but Space Ace, so I thought this was kind of interesting, but again, this only lasted 2 or 3 issues. This was one of my very first video game comics that I collected, and this is a number 1. If you remember the video game Earthworm Jim, they had a few comics that came out for that video game. TV show comics, they have plenty of those. This is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is written by Joss Whedon, who created the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV series. So I collected a few of these comics as well. Green Arrow, I wasn't a big fan of, but when they reinvented Green Arrow, and they actually had the movie director Kevin Smith write a storyline for it, I'm a big Kevin Smith fan, so I collected this series of Green Arrow comics, I think up to about 50. This one was interesting because it's Superman and Batman teaming up, and of course, who doesn't love Superman and Batman, right? So I collected those. Oh, these are a couple of more Star Wars comic lines that came out. A couple of the first ones, actually. This is Star Wars Empire and Star Wars Republic. Now, the most unusual comic I would say I have in my collection is this one here. Every once in a while, they will have comic characters combined for one comic, and this is probably the most unusual one I have. Archie meets the Punisher. Yeah, who would dream to put these two together? Well, in any event, that's a look at some of the comics that I have in my collection. Pretty geeky, huh?